Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you for allowing us to have this slot at your virtual conference, and thank you everybody for joining. So my name is Christian Syme, and I am the UK Export Finance Manager for Wales for UK Export Finance. I'm going to be presenting half of our slot now, and then my colleague Leisha Blackburn is going to be presenting the other half. So you'll see how that works in a minute, and then we will have some time at the end, hopefully, for some questions. So please feel free to ask any questions at the end if there's anything you want to run. I can see there's a few more people joining, shall I? Okay, so as I said, yeah, my name's Christian Syme from UK Export Finance. I'm going to present half of this, and then I'm going to pass over to my colleague Leisha Blackburn, who's also on the call, to do the other half. Next slide, please, Paul. So this is one of the main things that you need to remember. In fact, if you've just remembered this by the end of the presentation, that would be brilliant. So our mission statement is to ensure that no viable UK export fails for lack of finance or insurance from the private sector. And this is the key bit, while operating at no net cost to the taxpayer. So the idea is that if you have a viable export contract, you should be able to come to the network of UK Export Finance Managers, of which there is myself covering Wales, and we will be able to guide you and help you to find the financing or the insurance that you require in order to fulfil that contract. Next slide, please. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with who UK Export Finance are. We are the world's first export credit agency, established in 1919. Most countries, particularly developed countries, have an export finance agency. Some of them are private and some of them are public, and some of them are a mixture of both. So here in the UK, we sit alongside Treasury, and then we also work alongside the Department for International Trade. And we work very closely with the main high street banks and then a whole wide range of other private lenders and credit insurers. We are set up to complement, not compete with the private sector. I'll explain that in a little bit more detail as we go through. So the main products that we work with is export credit insurance, buyer finance, so that's finance that we put in place for your overseas buyers, and then finance products that support you with any working capital requirements that you might have. And this is just a little bit of reassurance. We were named the best export credit agency by the Global Trade Review and Trade Finance Global. We get named this regularly, so this is an accolade that we're very happy with, and it should give you comfort that you're in safe hands. Next slide, please, Paul. So these are just quick stats. In 2019 to 2020, the financial year, we provided £4.4 billion worth of support. We supported around 339 businesses exporting to 69 different countries. The key element here is, and I'm assuming that many of the companies that are on this call now are SMEs. So the bulk of what we do is with SMEs. In fact, the biggest user of our short-term trade finance products, so that's everything that's related to working capital and bond support, I'll come on to those, is actually based here in Wales and is an SME. Next slide, please, Paul. This is a quick overview of the different products that we have. It looks quite complex slide, but we're going to go through it in little brief sections, and I've got some case studies as well, which I hope will illustrate a little bit better how they actually work. Really, it can be split into two. So there's the financing that's available for the overseas buyers, and this is the part that my colleague Leisha is going to cover in the next bit of the presentation. Then there's all the support that is available for you as a Welsh exporter, the support that's available for your companies in order to help you to fulfill those contracts. So that could be the financing for the working capital or credit insurance, so insurance against non-payment. And there's a list of different products there that you can see for each section, and that we work hand in hand with your bank in order to help you to access these. So much of what we're putting in place are guarantees with your bank. So we're taking the discomfort and the risk away from the bank. We're taking up to 80% of the risk in some cases, so that the bank is able to put in place the facilities that the exporter needs. For the insurance products, we're working where the private market is not able to provide private sector insurance. And then on the buyer finance side, as my colleague Leisha will cover later, this is a very similar model where we're putting in place bank guarantees, so they would be with overseas banks to put in place financing for your overseas buyers. I'm going to go through these in a little bit more detail, and then you will see how they work. Next slide, please, Paul. And again. So this is probably one of our most used products. This is called the Export Working Capital Scheme. So this is where we provide a guarantee to a bank. So we would work with the exporter's bank. Usually the exporter's bank would be one of the main high street banks. So that would be NatWest, Barclays, Santander, HSBC, RBS NatWest, Lloyds Bank, for example. We have a very slick process with this bank, so it all actually goes through an online automated process if your requirements fall within a certain range of easy to identify amounts. So it's sort of limits of the financing that you need and the duration of the financing. Usually it can all go through a quite quick automated process. Sometimes it needs to go what we call into a manual process, and that can take a little bit longer, but we're still able to support. So the Export Working Capital Scheme provides a guarantee of up to 80%. So that's 80% of the export contract. And this is usually used in circumstances where an exporter wins a higher value contract than normal. So some things come in and it blows all the working capital that the company has out of the water. They've maybe got a very busy pipeline of projects coming through. Whatever there is, there's a squeeze on the working capital. The exporter might then typically go to their bank to look for some kind of finance facility. The bank might have some reluctance or hesitance to put that in place. Perhaps they're already at their credit risk appetite. There can be a range of different reasons that the bank's unable to immediately access the finance the exporter needs. The bank then works with us, so we work hand in hand with the exporter and their bank to look to access a UKEF guarantee to put in place the financing for that exporter. Next slide, please, Paul. So this is the other one that is very commonly used. So it's the bond support scheme. So the export working capital can cover all sides that are related to the fulfillment of the contract. The bond support scheme is specific to bonds. So this can be performance bonds, bid bonds, retention bonds, warranty bonds, often used in heavy manufacturing and where there's a movement of capital goods and they're wanting security around the performance of that bond. The bonds sometimes can be up to 10% of the contract value, so that again can put a big hole in the working capital of an SME. And they would go to their bank to look for some support. They might have to cash cover that bond. Again, guarantees of up to 80% of that bond value. So the bank would work with the exporter and UK Export Finance to put in place a guarantee to allow that facility to be put in place. That can then reduce the size of the deposit that the bank might request from the exporter. Sometimes there then is no longer a need for cash cover from the exporter in order to secure the bond, and that obviously allows the exporter to be able to fulfill that contract. Again, it's accessed through the participating banks, so usually the bank that the exporter is working with. There are some banks that sit out with the main high street banks that we mentioned that can also use our guarantee schemes. That's something that the export finance managers can put you in contact with. Next slide, please. Now, some of you might have heard about the General Export Facility. This is actually a new product that was launched fairly recently, and whereas the Export Working Capital Scheme and the Bond Support Scheme were tied to specific export contracts, the General Export Facility is exactly as it says on the tin. It's a much more flexible guarantee which can cover a wide range of bank facility types to unlock the financial support for general business activities of UK exporters. So the key things here are that it doesn't need to be linked to a specific export contract. In fact, it can be used for export contracts and domestic contracts. Same as before, it guarantees up to 80% of the bank's risk, the maximum guarantee cover period of 5 years, and it can support bank facilities valued up to around 25 million. If you have projects over 25 million, we actually have a different product that can operate in that arena. Again, it's accessed directly through participating banks. Now, UK Export Finance doesn't generally have a minimum size of facility or any limits on the size of the companies that we can work with, but I should say really that the banks often do. So often companies that fall into the business banking arena, now this is sort of can be in the sub £6 million turnover range. You'll know whether you've got a designated relationship manager within your bank. You might have an idea of where you sit in your bank's category range. Sometimes it can be harder to access the UKEF guarantees. Not always, though. It does depend on the bank. It depends on the company, the growth profile of the company. It also depends on the accounts of the company. And I think, as I mentioned before, if you go back to our mission statement, one of the key things about the export finance managers and the roles that myself and my colleagues fulfill is that we have an obligation to try and find a solution for an SME if they have a viable contract. So ideally that would be working with your bank in order to access one of our guarantees. But it could also be that we can then signpost you to other sources of finance. So if you are not able to use one of our guarantees, we can then have a good look at what the contract entails and have a think about who else is out there in the marketplace that can help you. That isn't always done with a UKEF guarantee, but we can at least try to point you in the right direction. So we work very closely with the Development Bank of Wales, for example. I think some representatives from there are on the call here. And then we work with other finance providers, some of whom you may already be working with, invoice discounters, people like Bibi. There are many, many others. So I can take a good look at what your actual requirements are. We can try and have a look at working with your bank, and then we can look and see who else might be able to support you. The next slide, please, Paul. So with the general export facility, this just gives you a little bit of information about how you would be able to be eligible to use this scheme. So your export sales must represent at least 20% of the annual turnover in any one of the last 3 financial years, or the applicant's export sales must represent at least 5% of their annual turnover in each of the last 3 financial years. So this is just specific to the general export facility. For the bond support scheme and the working capital scheme, these requirements aren't there. You just need to have an export contract. Next slide, please, Paul. Okay, so we've spoken about working capital and support for bonds. Another product that we have is the export insurance policy. So this is cover against non-payment from the buyer and against not being able to recover costs of performing a contract because of certain events causing its termination. These might be political events, insolvency, it depends. That can cover up to 95% of the contract value. I said cover insolvency of the buyer, failure to pay, any political or economic events outside the UK that would cause the contract not to be able to be fulfilled or terminated in its correct time lag. Now, you can apply to this directly through UKEF or through one of our approved brokers. So there's a list of those on the website, or I can give you a name. You can apply for this if you have been refused cover on the private market. So I said earlier that we're not in competition with the private market. In fact, we can't compete with the private market on the insurance side. So once you've had a refusal from your usual insurance broker, whether it's Euler Hermes or Atradius, Cofas, whoever it might be, and they have said, no, I'm sorry, we're not able to find cover for this contract for you, then you can apply to use our policy. It's not always guaranteed that we'll be able to help, because if Euler Hermes and Atreides have identified a very significant risk, that means they're not able to offer cover. It might be that we also identify that risk and aren't able to offer cover, but we can often have a greater risk profile than the private market, so it is definitely worth a try. Now, I think I mentioned before that sometimes we would work with, or we would signpost you to private financiers, and if we're not able to put in place guarantees through your bank, they will often work with export credit insurance policies and things like letters of credit. So they would like to get some security if they're going to lend you some money in the private market arena in order to help you support an export contract. They're going to want to see documentation in place so that they have ways of recovering that money, and one of them might be an export credit insurance policy. And then what can happen is you can put them down as the loss payee. Okay, next slide, please. Now, I said I would mention a couple of quick case studies just before I pass on to my colleague Leisha for the second part. This is one here. These are just a couple of Welsh companies that we've supported. One of them is Excelerate Technology, Cardiff-based tech company, an excellent company. They provide major incident ground technology for emergency service customers all around the world. They secured an order to supply multiple incident command vehicles to Qatar. They had some working capital requirements in order to fulfill that contract. So their bank was Barclays, so they worked with Barclays and ourselves in order to put in place a loan with a UKEF guarantee, which allowed them to be able to complete the order and retain the funds that they needed to grow. They have actually gone on to win many other overseas contracts and continue to work closely with UK Export Finance. So it's a really exciting growing business, and one that we were very proud to be able to support. There's just one more case study I just wanted to show you. Next slide, please, Paul. So the next case study is Flamgard. Some of you might know this company as well, another excellent Welsh company based in Pontypool, I think. They won a contract to supply dampers for the Chernobyl site. It was worth 1.5 billion euros. Now, this contract came with a very sizable bond requirements, and as I mentioned before, often they have to be cash covered, sometimes up to 10% of the contract value, so you can work out the maths there. 10% on the 1.5 billion was a very sizable deposit, and that we were able to work with their bank in order to put in place a guarantee which removed the requirement from the bank side for this deposit, which meant that the company had that extra cash available to be able to fulfill the contract. Now, that was quite a quick whistle-stop tour on my side. There will be contact details available. You can contact me, and then we've got some Q&A at the end. I'm just going to pass on to now my great colleague Leisha Blackburn, who works on the origination side, and she's going to talk a bit more about what we can do to support you overseas buyers and the work that we're doing internationally with some of our projects there. Thank you.
Lovely. Thanks so much, Kristen. If you could pop yourself on mute, I can just hear an echo of myself. Sorry. That's great, thank you. Yeah, so as Christian says, so my name is Leisha Blackburn, and I work for UKEF's origination team, which is essentially our international business development arm. So if I can have the next slide, please, Paul. So we focus on the buyer finance side of the business. So the geographies I cover are basically the whole of Asia minus China, but I think I've been asked to speak to you today, given my obvious vested interest. You can probably tell by my dulcet Welsh tones that I'm based in Wales, usually based in London, but the one of the perks of the COVID situation means I'm working from home back in Wales, which is great. So yeah, our team is we have a hub based in London usually, but we also have a network of colleagues overseas based in key markets across the globe. If I can have my next slide, please. So yeah, we have a hub team based in the UK, but we also have a network of colleagues based in key markets. They sit in the British embassies alongside our Department for International Trade colleagues. So they have excellent market knowledge, and they're able to develop kind of commercial ties and can help match UK businesses to local projects. So they really are kind of eyes and ears on the ground, and they've been, you know, especially vital to us over the last couple of months where we haven't been able to travel at all. So we have 11 colleagues at the moment, but we've now been given the budget to grow this to 30 representatives in time. You know, they've really shown their value, so we're recruiting several more markets at the moment. If I can have my next slide, please. So just a little bit of detail on our buyer finance products. So we can offer financing in two main ways. So either through providing bank guarantees, as Christian says, or in some cases we can actually lend directly as well. But just starting with the bank guarantees. So the buyer credit guarantee, it can help put the British exporters in a better position to offer a customer in a foreign country that long-term financing on a specific export order. So, you know, you can use this financing solution as an extra selling point when you're negotiating contracts abroad. So with this guarantee, we guarantee a payment to a bank that gives the foreign customer a loan so they can pay you. So the guarantee then means that, you know, the bank is certain, again, it's money back, you know, since we compensate the bank, for example, if the foreign customer is unable to or refuses to pay, or if money can't be transferred out of the country, or if war breaks out in the country, or, you know, any of those circumstances. So we effectively act as a credit enhancer so that the bank can then price the loan more favourably on the basis of a UK government sovereign guarantee. So this is beneficial for all three parties. So firstly, you know, the exporter is paid as though it has a cash contract. So you would receive your payment directly as the goods are shipped or the services are performed. The buyer or the borrower has time to pay over a number of years, and they can borrow at fixed or floating rates. And then the lending bank receives a guarantee from us for full repayment of the loan plus interest. So the majority of these buyer credits tend to range between, to be honest, between about 30 and 70 million pounds. So the average has been about 60 million over the last several years. But we do have another product, if I can have my next slide, please. So this product is recently revamped. It used to be called the Supplier credit, but it's now called the Standard Buyer Loan Guarantee. And it shares many of the same benefits of the previous product, but is typically used for smaller and more straightforward contracts. So, for example, something like, you know, the supply of equipment. The main difference between the two, other than the size, is the fact that we don't take documentation risk. But, you know, it has all the same benefits of the buyer credit product. And to be honest, this was kind of conceived because there's been a conception over the past few years, you know, that we're only here for the big players, we only get involved in large infrastructure or, you know, air and defence projects, but that's absolutely not true. Last year, about 77% of the businesses we supported were actually SMEs. So we're working really hard to try and improve our offering for SMEs, and we've set up a small deals initiative, which mostly deals with this Standard Buyer Loan Guarantee product. So yeah, I encourage you, if you have any opportunities that you want to discuss with us, no matter how small, you know, is always worth having that conversation with Christian as your export finance manager. If I can have my next slide, please. Brilliant, thank you. So if the other option then is the direct lending. So if commercial lending can't be sourced, or if it's too expensive, we can work with a partner bank in the market to deliver funding. We have a pot of money allocated to us by the Treasury, essentially. So there's a 5 billion kind of general pot, which is almost, to be honest, almost all being used up. But we have a kind of jewel in our crown. So in the last budget, it was announced that we were going to be given an additional £2 billion for what we call clean growth projects. So the definitions I'll come on to in a moment, but this, although we don't provide kind of concessional finance, this is probably the closest we're going to get in terms of pricing. So the interest rate on this one is fixed, and it's governed by the OECD. So the interest rates, you can actually find them online, but they're at kind of historic lows at the moment. So it's, you know, really, it is a really competitive offering, and it's in quite high demand, hence why the 5 billion pot has almost been used up. But if I can move on to my next slide, please. Sorry, I've just lost my, bear with me a second. So yeah, and this clean growth pot then, so we've done a little bit of work on defining exactly what we mean by clean growth, and it does cover more areas than you would initially think. So rather than just kind of renewable energy, it's quite broad, and it covers things like wastewater management, clean transportation, and green buildings as well. So in the past, our support, again, this has been quite heavily weighted towards the fossil fuel industry. So we're working really hard to change that perception as well and gain a greater sector breadth across our support. And this is only one of the initiatives that we're implementing to realise that. If I can have my next slide, please. So our products are suitable for all sectors. Sorry, I should have said this is just a couple of kind of the benefits of our financing. So our products are suitable for all sectors. We can, we don't only operate in emerging markets. So, you know, we're able to support exports to over 200 countries. We can offer local currency financing, so we can provide guarantees to local banks, which sets us apart from some other export credit agencies, and it lends itself well to projects where local currency revenues are generated, because then it protects the buyer from currency fluctuations. We can offer extended repayment tenors, so typically 2 to 10 years, but certain sectors can benefit from extended repayment terms. So for rail, it's up to 14 years, nuclear, water and renewables, we can go up to 18 years. So that's a good perk as well. Our guarantee is 100% unconditional, which is great. You know, as you can imagine, the banks love that. It covers things like political risk as well. Many other ECAs only offer 90 or 95% guarantee, but ours is unconditional, which is a big perk. And then finally, our minimum UK content requirements. So in order to be eligible for our support, an exporter has to have at least 20% UK content in their contract, but this can be quite flexible. So it covers things like, it covers goods, services and intangibles, so things like intellectual property as well. And we can also provide financing to a foreign contractor with UK content. You know, if some of their subcontracts are made up of UK suppliers as well. So, you know, 20% is our absolute minimum. We'll always try to maximise that where possible. In reality, we usually ask for 35, 40, 45% in the contracts that we're supporting. So we'll always try to push that up, and we rely on the support of the Department for International Trade and other stakeholders to help us kind of boost that figure. And we don't, you know, leave it up to the buyer's own discretion on how they get there. You know, we can offer lots of support in trying to bolster that figure, and we can even not hold what we call a supplier fair. So these are kind of one day matchmaking events. So if I can have my next slide, please. So these used to be in-person events in usually in London, or we've organised one in Aberdeen as well. But yeah, these are one-day matchmaking events where we bring the UK supply chain into the room with the buyer. So we invite them through trade associations, DIT, like I said, you know, Welsh Government if it's Welsh events. And we can get you in the room and have those conversations to try and bring you along with us for the projects that we're supporting. So just to give you an idea, if I can have my next slide, please. Brilliant, thank you. So this was a case study of an event that we did probably a couple of years ago now, actually, but it's a good example. So we were planning to support $117 million contract in financing for ENCA and GE for some power projects in Iraq. So we held a partnership, held an event in partnership with energy sector bodies, NOF and the EIC, just to connect the companies in the UK supply chain with the projects. So yeah, given the obvious kind of implications of the pandemic, we've not held one in a while, as you can imagine, but we can offer them virtually. And we'll be picking these up again very soon. Actually, we have one event coming up. It's a bit of an interesting one for the delivery of a Six Flags amusement park in Saudi Arabia. So you can't really get more random than that. But yeah, so they're looking to increase the UK content in things like the infrastructure and the site development, landscape, specialty features, steel structures, and media production. You know, everything you can imagine. So yeah, you can find out more information about our kind of upcoming events. Probably the best place is our social media platforms. So we're on LinkedIn and Twitter. We tend to advertise them on there, and we do kind of direct email marketing campaigns as well. Also on our kind of socials, you can find out about kind of any events we're participating in, or any, you know, roundtables or kind of speaking engagements. So if you have any specific markets of interest, or you're interested in a specific sector, it's a good place to find out about the activities that we're participating in. If I finish off with a couple of case studies. Lovely, thank you. So I had a little look at the profile of some of the businesses that registered for this event, and I tried to pick some that might be quite pertinent. So the first one here was again €40 million project for several, I think it was 5 district hospitals and 1 polyclinic in Ghana. So the buyer was the Ministry of Health in Ghana, and Vamed are an Austrian company, but they have a UK subsidiary. They were looking to up their UK content in these projects, so we held a supplier fair, and we were able to matchmake companies for these projects. So I think the UK content in the end came from the medical equipment, the medical and the non-medical furniture as well, kind of the structure, things like doors, mechanical and electrical equipment, lots of different things. I know that the UK has a good kind of story in healthcare and life sciences. So I can have my next slide. So this was our support. Sorry, I think the slide, there we go, lovely. This was our support for a UK company delivering water and wastewater treatment solutions in Kurdistan. It was part of a larger national wastewater and sewerage programme, and it consisted of kind of sub-projects. So this contract covered the preliminary stages of scoping and kind of scoping phase of the project, including the social and environmental impact assessments, the relevant site surveys and detailed designs. And this one we were able to offer our direct lending facility for £28 million. If I can have my next slide, please. Sorry, it's still stuck on by water for me. Sorry, Paul, is it stuck on the slide?
No, I'm on the Angola one now, I am.
Oh, right, okay. It might just be my screen. Sorry about that. Oh, there we go. It's moved for me now. Brilliant, thank you. So this was the UK exporter was called Inkatuk, I think you pronounce it. I'm not really sure, but they delivered several agricultural projects in Angola for the Ministry of Finance. And the UK content in this one came from the building materials, agricultural machinery, water supply, and things like the technical studies, engineering, direction, the management. So this was a good one I wanted to pick out because this is one where we did half of the, so the total amount was 73 million US, and we did 50% buyer credit blended with 50% of the direct lending. So it just shows that we can be quite flexible in the way that we structure the transaction. And then the final slide is for was a good one I wanted to pick out because it's just an example of one of the smaller transactions that we've done. So this was what we used to call the Supplier Credit Finance Guarantee. This was for £1.2 million for Rotormead Limited for their contract to China. So it was the supply of continuous casting machine to be used to kind of produce complex alloy rods. So we were able to provide a guarantee to the London Forfeiting Company, which just then enabled the lender to pay Rotormead the contract value as soon as it was delivered. So it helped them with their kind of cash flow and their risk management. And that's it from me. Sorry, I appreciate it was a bit of a whistle-stop tour. I think we've gone over slightly, but I hope you found it helpful. And I just wanted to kind of pass on the message that, you know, we are absolutely here to support the smaller end of the scale on the projects as well. And if you do have any export opportunities you want to discuss, then, you know, Christian should be your first point of contact. Just to see which of our products might be more suited to you, and then we can be brought in, or you can, you know, speak to maybe one of our IFEs if there's a specific market that you're interested in. And yeah, we're very keen to talk to you no matter how big or small. But thank you very much. Maybe I'll pause now for any questions.
We've had no questions, Leisha, posted in the message bar for you or Christian. Has anybody got any questions they would like to ask our colleagues here from UKEF? In answer to the question somebody did raise, we will be circulating the presentation and Christian and Alicia's contact details around after the presentation. And also Christian's already posted a link to the Six Flags project in Saudi Arabia as well. So if anybody would like to join that Supplier event or to know a little bit more about it, the link's in the message bar. Okay. Yeah, if nobody's got any other questions, just a reminder, if you do need any support from UKEF, feel free to contact your international trade advisors and Welsh Government. We work closely with Christian, or contact Christian directly yourself. I just want to thank you both for attending the presentation this morning and delivering the presentation. And it's nice to always hear a Welsh accent from UK government as well. And always good to hear a Scottish accent too, Christian, as well, you know that.
Thank you.
If nobody else has got any questions, we'll draw this webinar to a close. Thank you all for participating, and we'll see you on the next webinar, which will be tomorrow. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr.